Grief and the loss of someone so dear shatters your heart and breaks it wide open. And there among the pieces of your heart, the shattered ruin, love explodes like a star being born. Now that all my mothers are gone and my grandmothers are gone, I must be my own grandmother. Grief is the strangest of house guests because it's always unwanted but won't leave. So we must welcome it in, embrace it, and learn to live with it. How do we mother ourselves? How do we hold ourselves the way that our grandmothers held us? How do we become everything we need for ourselves? Our shattered, reformed, fractal star hearts become so tender, so open to everything, so touched by the light on the leaves, deep saddened by poisoned tongues, harmfulness.
It's really, really important that Indigenous women have a voice in mainstream literature because for far too long our voices have been left out. We've never really had an opportunity to speak our minds or really address a lot of the issues that impact us from day to day. And so the way to do that is through writing, because writing is also healing. And the publishing industry in Canada really needs to make room for our voices. It's not enough to say, you know, we published one Indigenous woman this year and that's good. And you really need to look at reconciliation and diversity and geography as well. A lot of our northern women are experiencing a lot of land dispossession, domestic violence, inability to access services or services for education. And the way to really let people know that this is happening is through educating, and one way to do that is through writing. So even in fiction, it's possible to educate people on what's happening on the ground with our Indigenous women. And so it's really important to make room for our voices and let us tell our own stories for once.
Moved to tears by the color of flowers and how they sway in the wind. Grief may be an unwelcome guest. At my age, it comes back so often it may as well never pack its bags and leave. But grief has its beauty. I don't despair at my wrinkled, age-spotted hands. They are my mother's. When it's our time to leave this world, love is all we take, and love is all we leave behind. We leave by degrees over our lifetimes. Because when the most precious ones leave, they take a piece of our hearts and spirits with them, and leave a piece of their heart and spirit behind. Parts of us are with them there. There are some who hold so much of our love that when they pass, we feel the tiny leaving, the passing away of part of us, a love sacrifice, flesh offerings of the heart for those beloved in our eyes.
The non-Indigenous population of this country must not only talk, they must also act. These are not academic essays, neither are they exhaustive. They are my personal take on this new world brought to us by colonialism, a world in which we still struggle to survive. These essays examine the brutal intentions of colonialism that continue to harm us, whether that be in the form of starvation policies, residential schools and their child welfare descendants, the acceptance of brutality against our women, the dishonesty of government, or the insufficiency of monetary compensation. Because I wrote that book out of a sense of rage at non-Indigenous people and their constant refrain of why can't they just get over it, referring to residential school survivors, both direct and intergenerational. And having represented survivors for over 14 years as a lawyer, having members of my family attend residential school, I thought, okay, you want to know why we can't just get over it? I will tell you. And I did, and apparently people are hearing, and that's the most rewarding thing that I could possibly do, was to facilitate people truly hearing and understanding.
Kansi and Totimak, Mitanina and Askamon, thank you for joining us. My English name is Monique-Gray Smith. I'm also known as Mystique Washkigos. I'm honored to be videoing this piece today on the Lekwungen-speaking people's territory. I come on my mom's side. My grandfather was Noel Nanape, and then adopted by the Cardinals, and from Pempikasi's First Nation, Noel Nanape, on my mom's side, and my grandmother was Isabel Gray. On my dad's side, I'm the granddaughter of Raymond Smith and Beatrice Johnstone. And my wife and I live here on these beautiful territories and have been raising our family here, and our twins will be 20 in October, which is really wild to think about. And one of the things I do is write books. Our stories are medicine, and not only for us as Indigenous women or Indigenous people, but I think they're medicine for all of humanity, to understand ways of being, ways of knowing, ways of living, ways of expressing ourselves, ways of caring for each other, and not just each other as humans, but all the living beings. I'm working on a couple of things right now. I'm working on a children's book that'll probably be called Cookum's First Drum, which is somewhat of a true story of my mom getting her first drum at 82 years of age. And it's the story about how child welfare impacts and disrupts culture and language and connection to community. And I'm working on something totally different, a novel based on two Scottish sisters. So there is one Indigenous character, Tilly, who showed up in my first two novels, but mostly it's the story of two Scottish sisters. I'd say My Heart Fills with Happiness is probably my favorite piece of writing that was a gift to me and has come through me. Also because it's illustrated by Julie Flett, that book. But that last question, what fills your heart with happiness, was designed for children to talk about what fills their heart with happiness so that they can have more of that in their life. And when I designed that as the last question, I was thinking about when my children were little, and whenever there was a book that had a question in it, they would answer, and then they would turn to myself or whoever was reading and ask them that question. And so I wanted the children to also ask the adults who were reading them that book, what fills their heart with happiness, as a way to change the neurobiology so that children and adults go to bed or after reading that book flooded with what's called oxytocin, this love hormone, instead of perhaps cortisol, the stress hormone. So I'm going to read a short piece from Braiding Sweetgrass for Young Adults, which is adapted from Robin Wall Kimmerer's extraordinary, groundbreaking New York Times bestselling book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And this is a piece where she correlates history and the importance of our words and our stories and our inner strength. Despite Carlisle, despite exile, despite a siege for 100 years long, there is something, some heart of living stone that will not surrender. I don't know just what sustained the people, but I believe it was carried in words. Pockets of the language survived among those who stayed rooted to place. The Thanksgiving address was spoken to greet the day. Let us put our minds together as one and send greetings and thanks to our Mother Earth, who sustains our lives with her many gifts. Grateful reciprocity with the world, as solid as a stone, sustained them when all else was stripped away. And I love that because it reminds us how important our words are, and that our stories are a collection of our words, of our knowings, of our teachings, and of what we want to create in the future, and the importance of gratitude as the root of those visions and hope and possibilities.
When you left, 48 years of my life flashed before my eyes, and I saw us on the land, free, and unburdened, laughing, eating wild foods. You at night, telling stories by the light of fire, talking of long ago times, family, sorrows, joys. Some losses leave you without breath. I'm trying to learn how to remember to breathe with half of me there and half of me here. There is nothing that will fill the space of your leaving. It's like the last glance at a now empty home, when you think it's so much bigger now that it's empty. The space you left is bigger too, and my work now is to take the piece of you that you left behind and embrace it so tightly that it fills the hole in the part of me you took when you left.